Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from the Colonial Dungeon, this is the Court-Martail Podcast! Introducing your host for this evening, he has a bald spot on the top of his head, and he weighs in tonight at a number you don't need to know. He is the Colonial Loudmouth, Sean McCarty!
And welcome to another terrific, spectacular, phenomenal, unprecedented episode of the Court-Martail Podcast today that is just like any other week except better, because it is 1 week further in to our all collective lives, and you should all be so happy, the way I am happy to be here ranting about utter nonsense the way that I normally do to all of you. And as usual, I am your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty. We have a lot to talk about today, but first, allow me to introduce the man who will be stepping in not only this week, but the week after. As we continue on our ratings battles and our ratings war, he is the man who cannot resist the urge to find traffic anywhere, anytime, and have it soar through his side of the commentary to make sure that you hear the sounds of speeds and the sounds of cars each and every day. He is one half of the greatest tag team known to man, alongside Spark Plug Bob Holly. He is the Sparkier Plug, Skyler Greenberg. Welcome to the show.
Here I am.
Da-da, da-da.
Hurricane.
But not the hurricane.
Yeah, you know.
But not the hurricane.
I heard about your issues on the East Coast with hurricanes, so I figured I'd open with that.
Yeah. And also, you're a little jealous that Sky, or not Sky, your Sky, that Josh Ageddon made his own little musical intro.
Yes, although trust me, I'm not going to use a one-hit wonder as my intro. But ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to be back on the show because I could not wait to share my ever-important opinions about professional wrestling to you people.
And it is.
So here I am.
And this is the first time, probably in a good couple of months or so, that you've actually been on the show for our actual just discussions rather than doing our back and forths. So this has got to be somewhat exciting.
It is. Now, we have a lot of things we have to get to, don't we?
Yes, as always, we have a lot to talk about. And the first is we are going to continue. Speaking of Josh Ageddon, the last time he was on the show, we did a fun little game where we gave a career grade to 8 individuals. And it so happens that I had at least like 20 names on the list, but we only got to 8. So I figured what would be fun today, Sky, would be to continue with the career grades, get another perspective on grading these certain individuals. These are not the same people that we presented last time, so these are going to be 8 new people. And what I want you to base your grades on is their career from start to finish, from when they broke in to when they retired, or where they are at this moment. Do you think you can do that?
I think I can do that.
I know you can do that. You're going to have to do it because that's what you asked for and signed up for when you got onto the Court-Martail Podcast. And we are going to start. I'm not going to torture you to start. I'm going to give you one that you might actually be able to look on with some level of fondness. We're going to start with the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Ooh. So let's see here. It's undeniable it has to be an A, because when you think of the greatest professional wrestlers in the business, Shawn Michaels has to be in the top 5, if not the best.
He's definitely up there.
He's the quintessential professional wrestler in terms of character, wrestler. He does everything that you would want in a professional wrestler, heel or babyface.
In ring, I mean, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Shawn was the best performer of anybody. I mean, there's Shawn could make a broomstick look great. In similarly a way that actually, you know what, we're gonna get to him later, so I don't want to spoil that one yet. But Shawn, I would say it's got to be up there in that A A area. The only thing that would knock it down for me with Shawn is his buy rates. You know, Shawn is great. There's no doubt he's great, but his championship run was lackluster in buys, both pay-per-view and just ticket sales in general. You know, Shawn's main event run really, he was so good, but it almost was like to his detriment because it just didn't, there was something about Shawn being so good that hurt the way that people wanted to go in and see him. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, there are two parts to that. First, you have to consider that the era that he was a main eventer.
Sure.
And the era that he was in the main eventer was one of the worst eras of talent for WWE. Because it was the New Age era. They were in transition from
New generation
to the 90s. And there was a lot of really bad wrestlers that he had to compete with. And Shawn Michaels is really good, but he only can do so much.
Well,
when you're working with guys like, I don't know, Psycho Sid.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. It's difficult when you've got certain wrestlers booked. But, you know, part of that, I wouldn't even say that the wrestlers themselves were bad, but it was just a time of crap gimmicks. And, like, Vince just wanted everyone to have a job, you know? Like, the dentist ended up being Kane, right? And Kane ended up being terrific when Kane got to be Kane. You know, even that guy, what was his name? Remember Skinner? He was that dude who was like supposed to be the Crocodile Dundee ripoff.
Yeah, I remember him.
He ended up being the primary teacher for FCW down in Florida when that got started.
And he's not a bad teacher. Look at his alumni.
Yeah, he's got a great, you know, laundry list of stuff. You'd have to imagine that if, you know, this is Vince McMahon and this is WWE format, so obviously they're going to try and hype up the entertainment value rather than the wrestling value. So, but if they hadn't bridled him with that kind of gimmick, you have to imagine that he would be looked at in a different perspective. And Shawn, the fact that Shawn stood out amongst them, I don't know if that's really a testament to how good he was. He just was able to back up no matter what he was in the ring, which is what kept him where he was.
And the innate charisma that he had, because Shawn Michaels is not the biggest guy in the room.
No.
But when you look at him, you can't look away because of his charisma, his facial expressions. Shawn Michaels is one of those guys who can draw you because he has it.
Despite the fact that I was never wowed by Shawn's promos. Not really.
That's probably the weakest part to Shawn Michaels' game is that he's not a natural promo talker.
No, save for that one promo in Montreal in 2005.
Oh yes.
That was brilliant.
Undoubtedly, Shawn Michaels is an A.
Yeah, he's I would put him in A. I would probably put him A- just because of a couple of those little shortcomings. But let's move on to somebody else who's. I think it's going to be interesting to see where you rank this guy, and a guy who's gotten a lot of comparisons to Shawn Michaels, and that is AJ Styles.
Oh, this is tough.
It's a hard one.
AJ is one of my favorite wrestlers.
Well, while you think about it,
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to just throw this out there with AJ because it's start to finish. The pro wrestler he became is not as indicative of what he was when he first broke in and when he first started in WCW and even in early TNA, because a lot of that was much more of the glorified spot fest, which had its moment because, you know, the X Division was what the X Division was and that was their whole focus. But what AJ became as far as an actual worker and all the subtleties and the movements and what, you know, New Japan did for him, it's certainly an escalation with him for how he ended up being so revered as he is now. Continue.
Well, part of that is that the early career AJ Styles was just an experience.
Right.
But once he got that experience, once he wrestled around the world in the United States, Japan, Europe, he finally put it all together. And when he came to WWE, he had probably the best debut for a non-homegrown WWE talent I've ever seen.
Well, too bad we didn't see it, Kevin Dunn.
Oh, I will get to Kevin Dunn later if we have the time, because I have a lot of things I need to say about that man.
Well, Kev, we're gonna have to superstar spotlight Kevin Dunn at one point and just literally just tear him a new one. To really get, I mean, there's so much. There's a laundry list we could say about him. But back to AJ Styles.
But AJ is one of the most dynamic professional wrestlers because his arsenal of moveset moves is so vast, and he can pull out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different moves.
Yep.
He can pull out any story that you need to. I would rate some of his WWE Championship matches, especially in his first reign as a heel, as some of the best matches I've ever seen.
There were some good ones.
And that's like particularly his matches with John Cena, even though they did get a little finisher heavy.
Yep, they sure did.
I always did enjoy them. His triple threat with Dolph Ziggler and Baron Corbin, that was an amazing one.
Which you wouldn't expect, but really AJ made that match.
Oh yeah. Like, I give props to both of those other guys for doing their best, but this is AJ Styles, the master storyteller. The only thing with AJ, just like Sean, is that he's not the best promo guy, but when you have that level of wrestling talent, you don't need to be a great promo talker because you let your moves do the talking.
Right. And the thing with AJ is that he definitely, he grew into his promos. I mean, he definitely kind of came into his own as to what presentation he would give. But I would agree with you there. Promos were really not his thing. But I will say that if anyone who was able to kind of match something that John was able to, they were able to play off each other very well in that feud. But how do you grade a man like AJ Styles?
I have to give him an A.
Same grade. I think that's fair. I would put him a little lower, maybe a B plus, just because it did take him a while to warm up to get to where he was, and the fact that it required leaving TNA. He had to leave TNA to get to that spot. But,
yeah, there's no doubt that if he had stayed at TNA, he wouldn't be the performer that he is today.
Correct. Yes, it's but still, there's no denying AJ is great. Moving on, I'm gonna give you another tough one here. How about the Big Show? This is so hard. I have no idea because he's turned 745 billion times. He's had some good, memorable moments, in some of the matches he's in, but he was another one that took a while to rev up as far as the quality goes. He was so diluted with how WCW mishandled him, and then he was actually sent back to developmental by WWF after he was lost when he debuted in WWE. Then won the world title off of Brock Lesnar and a Paul Heyman betrayal. That happened, folks. That happened. And then kind of just flip-flopped around, had a really memorable ECW championship run, was in arguably one of the most underrated Hell in a Cell matches of all time with the McMahons against DX and Unforgiven 2006, and then cried, and then turned heel, and then cried, and then turned babyface, and then cried, and then turned heel, and then beat Cody for the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania, then cried, then turned heel, and then cried and turned babyface. And
somewhere around there, he wore a diaper. At one point, he had...
he did a sumo wrestling match. He had a sumo match at Mania. He fought Floyd Mayweather. How do you grade this man?
I don't know. But I will say this. The Big Show is one of the greatest big men in the industry.
No doubt.
Because his talent level for his size and the ability that he's been able to move his weight when he's in good shape is really impressive to see. Like, there's almost no one like him.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's tough, though, because he's had so many bad moments, but he also had so many great moments. Like when him and Brock Lesnar wrestled on Smackdown and they broke the ring, and for so many years we asked, was it a shoot or was it a work?
And then they redid it.
Those two guys would have broken the ring. And then they redid it, and then they broke the illusion.
And they redid it, and the ring broke the exact same way with the Big Show in the equation still.
It's the Big Show spot.
It's weird. It's just hard. It's hard for me to gauge.
You've had so many great matches, though. Like his triple threat with Edge and John Cena at WrestleMania.
Oh, that was great.
Match at Hell in a Cell against Sheamus one-on-one. That was a great underrated match.
Yep.
If you want to see a great underrated Big Show match, watch Sheamus versus Big Show. His match with Roman Reigns in a last man standing match, that was surprisingly good. Even his match in series with Braun Strowman, getting Braun Strowman over as the next big giant wrestler.
Yep. He's got his moments.
But then he had a relationship with Vicky Guerrero, and then he had something with Kelly, and then him and Kane were something. I don't know. Like
Big Show and Kane have like the weirdest relationship. Cause like they're just like, hey, you want to tag? Yeah, you want to tag? All right, let's win the tag belts. And then they do. And then they lose the tag belts. And then they're like, all right, you want to go your way? And I'll go my way. And they're like, all right, cool. And then they just leave. And that's the end of it. Like, there's no, like, bond between those two at all.
No, actually, there is a bond. Because I remember there was a promo backstage with the two of them. And then they tried to chokeslam each other. And then after they stopped each other from chokeslamming each other, Kane said, "You complete me."
Oh, God.
So a little bit of a weird homosexual undertone with Big Show and Kane.
So how do you grade the Big Show?
I have just brought down the class of the show, ladies and gentlemen.
This show has long lost its class. Classiness is not part of this show. The only time this show's classy is when I'm by myself, and it's that low bar to put a standard at. So don't you worry about that at all.
But I would give the Big Show a B-. I would give him an A if he didn't have all the dumb stuff that happened in his career, because he had a lot of dumb stuff.
He did.
Big Show has had a memorable career. Let's say that.
That's true. And you know, I give him credit for his longevity, for being around for so long, and then for finding success in acting. I mean, the fact that he's had so much, you know, he's been able to transition from that to what he's been able to do now. Like, I think that he really has had, you know, critiquing his in-ring stuff is certainly, I mean, that's the whole point of having the career grade. And he's had a hell of a career that very few people would possibly have and could possibly have. And he's an incredibly smart dude. If you want to hear some of the hit the nail on the head things about why wrestling isn't what it should be, watch his Broken Skull sessions with Steve Austin.
Oh, yes.
Because he said some things on that podcast that made me go, wow, you absolutely nailed it as to why we are in the situation we're in. And I give Big Show a ton of credit for that and how humble the dude is.
As a quick side note, do you think Broken Skull is the best wrestling podcast that there is right now?
No, I think the Court-Martail podcast is the best wrestling podcast there is right now. And if you want to know more about the Court-Martail podcast, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and chokeslam, final cut, whatever you want to call it, that bell button. Do it so you can get all things CMP, including next week's NWL versus ACPW Week 3, Month 3 review, included with a Tuesday live stream of our match of the week. The link is in the description for that match. Moving right along.
It's a doozy of a match.
It will be a doozy of a match. Moving on, let's go on to Charlotte. I'm giving you hard ones. I'm giving you hard ones to grade.
Because here's the thing, is that Charlotte is one of the most unique wrestlers that there is in professional wrestling for females, because she has a combination of size, strength, speed, power, and package it all together with a great look and one of the greatest wrestling names in history. Whether or not her greatness is manufactured or organic, there is something about Charlotte Flair.
You'd make the argument.
Like, her detractors cannot deny that she is one of the best female wrestlers in the ring. Her supporters cannot deny that she's gotten to where she is partially because she's Ric Flair's daughter. Like,
yes,
it's difficult to grade her because her career very much is how WWE planned it to be.
I hear what you're saying on that. I can certainly, I think the case can be made. I would argue, though, that even though she's, well, then again, this is WWE, and they don't really care about how good you are in the ring. But I think that if Charlotte had sucked dick, as far as actually, like, in the ring, if she was awful in the ring, she would not be where she is now. There's something about her that she took to the ring very, very well. And I'm not, in no way, I think, are you or I trying to take that away from Charlotte, despite the fact that her name is Flair.
Right, because if she was a really bad in-ring wrestler, she would be Nia Jax.
Right. Well, that was actually the person I was thinking of when I kind of retracted the statement. But
let's just go to it. Nia Jax is a terrible wrestler. Anyways.
We'll save her for another time.
Oh, yes, because I have a lot of things I need to say about Nia Jax.
Me too.
That cannot be contained in this single episode. But Charlotte Flair, I give her an A-, and the only reason I give her an A- is for two reasons. One, she's not a great promo.
Not really, no.
She comes off like a wooden piece of board with a blonde wig on it.
Well, and a big part of that is because everything that is given to her is manufactured for her, like you said. You know, everything's written down. You don't really get to hear Charlotte do what Rick could have because she's never been given that open lane to do something like that.
That's fair. And second, her career is still going,
right?
And we've seen her peak, but we haven't seen her decline. And I'm interested to see what that's going to be like. Because there are several wrestlers who kind of ruin their careers because they start doing things in their later years that really undermine what they did at the beginning.
Yeah, we talked about all of that. That was like 15 minutes of conversation last week about past their prime wrestlers, which, if you want to hear that segment, feel free to go back and check out last week's episode, a special Hurricane edition of the Court-Martail podcast. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell button. Continue.
But yeah, I would give Charlotte an A-. I will say this. The next few years of her career are going to be interesting because she's starting to hit the age where women wrestlers typically start declining, and we have to see how she handles things. Because the roster is going to continuously change. So there will be new challenges and new wrestlers for her to face, especially because NXT is currently a factory with wrestlers right now.
Yep.
But I'm interested to see where she goes and if she does, in fact, break Ric Flair's record.
And the good thing in her case is that, like, she's got a name so established that she's never going to lose her spot. You know,
it's just a matter of injury or Hollywood calls.
Well, or if she gets Becky Lynched. That was not. I did not mean to make that. Never mind.
Latino Andrade Cien Almas.
You know what I mean. Moving right along.
I know what you mean.
Moving right along. Let's go to. I'm going to continue with the tough ones. Speaking of people who may just be doing a little bit more than they should at their age, Jericho.
We're going to talk about him a little bit later in terms of his matches.
Yep.
I don't know about Jericho. Like, he's been wrestling for so long.
Yep.
And he's had so many great matches.
Yep.
But he's also been involved in some really dumb shit.
Yes, he has. It's hard because there's so many different phases of Chris. Because he's been so good at reinventing himself. I mean, Lionheart Chris I actually just watched a match when he was in Smoky Mountain with the Thrill Seekers, where he had broken his arm practicing a shooting star prior to the night. And the match was just, But Jericho got juice on it, and he was, pouring. I mean, worse than Shawn Michaels during his and Jericho's feud. Bad. I mean, he bled. He almost almost worse than Eddie Guerrero versus JBL bad.
Oh.
Almost. But, you know, from that early stage to Lionheart Jericho and his 1,004 holds and the big list of all the 1,004 holds that he knew and all the armbar, you know, he's arguably one of the most entertaining men ever. A terrific promo, terrific at reinventing his gimmick, great in the ring, was able to diversify what he needed to. But now Jericho is this dad bod, like overly flabby, still trying to act like he's like one with the cool kids in the playground, but is putting over a guy like Orange Cassidy. Did you see that recently?
So I saw that.
It's like I want to give Jericho such a high mark here, but he's starting to drop the letter grade for me the more that he's doing what he's doing.
Right. Like when I was talking about Charlotte, one of the guys I was talking about when it comes to ruining their career is Chris Jericho, because right now we are in midlife crisis Jericho.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's his gimmick.
Right
he's trying to recapture his youth, but the problem is that he is just. I don't know. I mean, between that and his rock band Fozzy, did you hear that they were actually playing shows in like South Dakota?
Yeah, they went to Sturgis, didn't they? Like they went to the motorcycle rally. They went to Sturgis.
I know, and they were playing for shows for free. And there was no social distancing. They were just there to play music. And I'm just like, why?
Because Jericho's, beyond all else, Jericho's favorite thing to do is do stuff because Jericho wants to do it.
I know. And that's what makes him such a great wrestler and what makes him such a terrible wrestler.
It's like, it's not even his wrestling that's the problem, though. It's hard to say. I mean, we're going to get to this matchup in a little bit, which is meh. But this, really, Jericho, most of his in-ring work is pretty solid. He's had multiple world championships, you know, that have been well-deserved. He works his ass off. I don't know.
There were times, it's just right now he's doing things that is making it harder and harder to defend him.
Yeah, like the football field stampede or whatever the hell it was called.
Like, right now, if I had to give him a grade, right now it would be a B-. If he didn't have all the stuff that was happening in AEW, it probably would have been an A grade. And if he continues to do terrible, terrible things, he's going to go into the C.
Yeah, for me,
because he's one guy who is not aged gracefully whatsoever.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, he was aging really well, and then AEW, and not even all of AEW. Just like since he lost the title, Jericho, everything up to that point was fine. And then he just fucking went off the goddamn deep end. And now I'm like, for me, I'm still putting him at an A- because there's so much of his career that is so good. But don't tempt me, Jericho. Don't tempt me. I know you care a whole lot about my opinion. I know you. Well, I don't know you. I've never met you, but I know you. And I know you care. And don't ban me, and don't you dare, Chris, to ban me from watching your damn show. First of all, I'm not watching it to begin with. Second of all, because I swear to God that I will come up there and I will lay the Smackdown. Somehow, Mike Chioda was the largest man in the ring between you, Orange Cassidy, and Mike Chioda. So you think that I'm a little afraid of Dad Bod Jericho? I don't think so. So try to ban me, mother flipper, and I will say actual words at you. Anyway, moving right along, let's go to Kevin Owens.
Ooh. So Kevin Owens is an interesting one because a lot of his career was very much on the independent scene.
Yes.
So in order to watch that, you'd have to tape trade. what I've seen from the independent scene is, like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It just depends on who he's wrestling and what type of match it is.
Yep.
Because he's got some garbage too.
Yep.
But his WWE career, up until a certain point, and I don't know what that point is, maybe it was when he beat Shane McMahon, but his career in WWE was one of the best I've ever really watched. Because when he started, especially as a heel, his character work was some of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But the problem is that people started liking him being a heel, and that's kind of when everything started going downhill.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I hate to bring Jericho up again, but the thing that I thought really killed Owens was the fact that Jericho was more over during the entirety of Kevin Owens' Universal Championship reign. And then he lost it to Goldberg in a minute.
Right. Which leads to which is another reason why I hate Goldberg.
Yes, which we've touched upon. We haven't given you the opportunity to full-fledged rant about it yet, but we will. We will. It's coming. But that is a pot that's just festering and brewing, and we don't want to serve it to the public until the time is right.
Well, if Goldberg gets his wishes and gets to wrestle Roman Reigns, then I'm going to unleash on him.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, back to Kevin Owens. And that's kind of an issue with Kevin Owens, is that as much as I love him, as much as I love the promos, as much as I love the in-ring work, he kind of gets outshadowed by people or outshined by people.
Yeah.
And I don't know necessarily if that's because it's him or the system that's around him, and maybe a little bit of both.
Well, you have to imagine that if he hadn't tapped to John Cena during his first feud, that we may be talking about something else altogether. But
that is true. And his Universal title reign did not do him any favors.
No, it didn't. Isn't that so weird? That's so depressing. Also, just further proving Josh Geddon's point that the Universal title is the most worthless world championship ever to be created.
Which, I'm going to throw a plug right now. The Totally Awesome Podcast had a video about the Universal title and the history of the Universal title.
Yeah, go and watch it.
It is it's a glorious watch. So people, tune into that podcast.
Yeah,
listen to that video.
It's definitely worth the listen. It is a justified evisceration of the Universal Championship. Which Kevin Owens, I would argue, is probably the only champion I've really enjoyed worth watching of the whole group. I mean, no disrespect to Brock, because Brock is Brock, and he can make any title feel at least a little bit more important, but...
Well, I mean, I enjoyed Finn Balor for the one day he had it.
Yeah.
Even though the fans shit on his match.
Yeah.
But Kevin Owens, he's still one of my favorites, and that is one of the things that no matter the bad stuff you are given, if I still like you, that means that you have something. And Kevin Owens has that for me. I'm going to be generous and give him a B-, because when you look at him, his matches, his promos, it's really, really good.
His promos are unmatched.
It's just that he's had circumstances that have made his career not as good as it could be.
Yeah, he's another one of those guys where it's like, don't hate the player, hate the game. Not talking Triple H, but, you know, it's like... I mean, when Owens was Steen, right? And I've seen some Ring of Honor matches with Steen, and he was doing a lot of spotty stuff, but I've always thought that Owens' top quality was being able to talk his ass off around anyone at any time, anywhere. And I still think he's able to do that. And for that alone, and he's always been able to do work. I mean, I think that he always goes a little too far in the ring, just does that one little extra thing. Like, he didn't need to jump off the WrestleMania sign this year, but I'm sure that Owens wanted to do that. You know, so it's like...
Come on, you have a pirate system to Raymond J. Stadium. Wouldn't you want to jump off that too?
No, I know. I'm just saying from a pro wrestling-minded standpoint, right? Not sports entertainment, because I think Kevin always liked that little sports entertainment edge, like doing stuff like that, which is fine. I mean, I've got nothing against that. I actually was going to be a little more favorable. I was going to give him a straight-up B, just because of the reputation he gained outside of WWE, and then what the impact he was able to make almost immediately coming into NXT. And if only John had been able to put a guy like Kevin Owens over, which I don't even know was John's fault, but I would say Owens would be much more highly regarded had he not fallen victim to one of the last ones to fall victim to Super Cena.
John Cena gives and then he takes it away.
He sure does. And speaking of, and that's a great segue to move into this guy. We was talking about the game, Triple H.
So I have a question for you, Sean.
Yes.
When you were talking earlier about Shawn Michaels getting a 4-star match out of a broomstick, were you talking about Triple H?
No, I actually very much love most of Triple H's in-ring work. I think he's actually quite underrated. I think that his big detriment, I think, was it's kind of what befalls Orton, too. It's like, it's too long and it's too much of he's very drawn out, very, like, he was one of those first ones who was like, long is better, long and slow is better, and I don't mind slow if it picks up, and I think Triple H has got a lot of matches under his belt that really are, especially during the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era. Say what you want about him being on top for so long, but Triple H has a track record of putting on some tremendous matches and has a repertoire to back it up as far as knowing moves and doing different things in different matches. I think he no matter what Bret Hart would say, I think Triple H is actually quite underrated. When it comes to his in-ring ability.
I have to agree. The strongest part about Triple H's in-ring ability is his psychology and storytelling.
Yes.
The stories he tells in the ring are amazing. And if every wrestler could just get a little bit of that storytelling into their game, then Triple H really would be a fantastic teacher. And he is, because you see a lot of it in his students in NXT.
Yeah, I mean,
so far.
You could see the evidence that Triple H and Shawn Michaels were very heavily influencing Gargano and Ciampa's feud, which is why it's so well regarded.
But the problem with Triple H is, as you mentioned, he thinks long equals epic, and he forgets that in order to have long equals epic, you need to have excitement. And the problem is that you could, I don't know, honestly, I'm making dinner right now. I could probably make dinner and be done, and Triple H's match will still be going.
He'd still be in the same hold. That's the
I know.
That's the problem.
And the other thing too with Triple H is that we have to address the elephant in the room, and that is
Stephanie.
the glory hunting.
Oh yeah.
We know that Triple H has put himself over other wrestlers because he was the favored son of Vince McMahon.
Well, and he, like Shawn, are master politicians. That's a big part of it too. You know, like, we could have done Hogan on this, and Hogan would be in the same spot. I mean, you could give Hogan an A+ career just for the fact that he was such a master politician to get into the position he was in. Triple H was really no different, and neither was Shawn.
And unlike Triple H, he didn't have to have sex with Stephanie.
I hope, because Stephanie was a child at the time. So,
and this is difficult too, because you have Triple H, the guy who buries talent, and you have Triple H, the guy who matures talent. I mean, NXT is his baby, and he's helped almost recreate the entire WWE roster with NXT wrestlers.
Yep.
At this point, there's maybe a handful of wrestlers who are on the main roster who have not been through NXT.
Right.
And that speaks to the work that he and his staff have done down there.
Yes.
So you can't just look at his career in the ring. You have to look out of the side of the ring in the business world too, especially when you consider that when Triple H gets the opportunity, he's probably going to be running the WWE.
I think so, at least to some degree. Yeah.
I mean, he's already running parts of it right now, but I think when the time for Vince McMahon to step down happens, I think Triple H is going to be that guy who takes over. And
at least from the creative standpoint. And from the booking standpoint.
As far as what I would give him a letter grade, I would give him an A-. I
Fair.
would give him a solid A or even an A+ if he didn't bury wrestlers. But he is a glory hound, and especially early career, he was over with the Reign of Terror. And
Yep.
there's a reason why it's called the Reign of Terror, because he was putting himself over almost the entire show of Monday Night Raw.
Except for the two guys he really took care of, which were Orton and Batista.
Yeah, and you could also Shawn too, but I mean...
Yeah, but Shawn didn't need Triple H necessarily. I think that was at a time when both of those guys really were on the same level, and they knew they were on the same level. So winning and losing, one beating the other, was kind of irrelevant, which is why Shawn never lost momentum, even though Triple H won most of the matches they were in together. It's
right.
But Shawn was untouchable at that point. It was like his comeback story was enough to propel him to another 10 years of good work.
Right. Which is another reason why I rate Shawn Michaels so high, is that he came back from injury and had a great comeback.
And injury and addiction and all that. Yeah, for sure.
And I will mention one more thing about Triple H, and then we will move on to the next person.
Yep.
He really should have put over Booker T.
I know. That's of anyone.
Of all the guys, he should have put over Booker T.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much unanimously described. If there was any one match that he should have just let that go, that was the one. Especially because Triple H dominated that whole match, and then there was a comeback, and then Triple H still won.
Exactly.
And it was flatter and a plate full of piss, and everybody hated it. And it was just... that was the only one. That was really the only one I have any major issue with, except maybe how badly the Spirit Squad got beaten, just because the Spirit Squad was a god-awful gimmick. But all the wrestlers in it were decent. They were. We never got to see them. We never got to see how good they actually could have been. Even Dolph.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
So, and now we got one last one, and you know what? I was going to choose Bret Hart, but because it's just for a matter of intrigue, let's do Dolph Ziggler. I don't know this one's tough, because Dolph has definitely got a reputation at this point of being able to do great things in the ring, but, basically being the first cannon fodder on the way to better things for wrestlers.
Dolph Ziggler is proof that there are some wrestlers who are not meant to be at the top, but they're so good workers that they can be on the way to the top. And that's pretty much his role as a gatekeeper. And you need those around.
For sure.
And Dolph Ziggler has been a fantastic gatekeeper. And it sucks he's never really had a moment to really cement himself in the main event.
Yeah.
But not everyone gets there. And that's something I think people have to realize, is that not everyone is meant to be a main eventer. If
Absolutely.
it was, then what's the point of having a mid-card title?
Right.
Or what's the point of having jobbers or enhancement talent?
Right. And no one's going to dispute that Ziggler can work. I mean, I think we all can. I think some of Ziggler's best work has been actually being that jobber to the stars and getting other people over. I mean, the fact that we now, because we are so cognizant of in-ring ability, we are able to recognize, even though Ziggler's win-loss record is abysmal, that Ziggler has earned the respect of many people just for the fact of how good his matches have been when getting other talent over. Except for Baron Corbin, because those matches were pretty bad.
Except for the one with AJ Styles, but that was AJ Styles doing most of the work.
True.
But the other thing with Dolph is that as much as I want to praise him, he doesn't stand out at all at any point. And part of the problem is that he feels like a ripoff of other people.
Well, because all his moves are ripoffs of other people, which I thought was a horrible decision.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, is that the person that he most aligns with would probably be Shawn Michaels, because of the super kick.
Yeah.
It's his most prominent move, and it's Shawn Michaels' move. But there are other people who do super kicks who are not related to Shawn Michaels, and they don't have that distinction. Like Adam Cole, for example, does the super kick a lot, but we don't compare him to Shawn Michaels as much. And that's because he has other things that make him distinct. Like he is Adam Cole.
Well, and I think another part of that too is the fact that Ziggler decided to take Shawn's mannerisms leading up to that super kick as well. Because nobody else does the setup and does the number one hit with the bullet and the stomps and the legs. It's just when Ziggler does it and takes Shawn's mannerisms, it just makes everybody go, hey, remember when Shawn Michaels did that and that was really fun? It doesn't make like you said, it doesn't make the tension doesn't go on to Ziggler. It just makes people reminisce about Shawn Michaels, and that inevitably hurts the way people that look at Dolph Ziggler.
And that's something that I think all aspiring wrestlers need to know, is that when you are trying to use a move, everyone has probably used that move in wrestling. So you have to find a way to make it your own, make it unique.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dolph Ziggler has never done that with any of his moves. Like, the sleeper hold is a common basic move that a lot of people have, and Dolph Ziggler doesn't do anything to make it special or make it interesting with him. Right. And the super kick, again, as you said before, it's a Shawn Michaels move, but so many other people use the super kick, but he doesn't do anything with it that makes him different.
Or the famouser. Even the famouser, because he gives the little Billy Gunn gyration beforehand.
Exactly. And it's also another thing, too, with Dolph, is that it's not his fault sometimes, because the booking he's had in some of the situations has been downright terrible.
I will never forget that Royal Rumble where he came in at number 30, and that was supposed to be this big surprise moment, and the crowd was silent. I mean, nobody cared.
Right. Like his most prominent match was against Alberto Del Rio for the World Heavyweight Championship when he was still defending champion. And the whole match was Alberto Del Rio doing a double turn with Dolph Ziggler and continuously kicking the shit out of him and winning the title. And that signifies Dolph Ziggler's career. He is
in a nutshell
for other people to climb on.
His the only really other thing that ever broke him apart from that was his matches with The Miz, which weirdly enough were great. 2016 at No Mercy, and I think the pay-per-view after that, which I don't remember what the name of that was, but other than that, he's got the Spirit Squad. I mean,
he's got a million matches with The Miz.
Yeah, it's
for a letter grade, I have to give Dolph Ziggler a C+, because I can't give him a B because he's not unique in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and that's no knock, Dolph. You know, we love you still, but I would have to agree. And that actually, Dolph is the lowest graded of any of these two run-throughs of any of the people that we've talked about. So, sorry, Dolph, but not everybody can be world champion. We said it before. But we have been talking...
Yeah. Especially with the world heavyweight mid-card belt.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I will get to in a couple of minutes, because we have a match of the week we need to talk about.
Yes, and you know what? Actually, it's amazing you said that, because we're at the second half of the show, and you know what that means. Roll that intro.
What time is it? It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, they down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the baby face cheer, then the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again our match of the week, and I have to apologize, Sky. I didn't watch this match until about like an hour before we started the show. I would not have given this to you if I had seen this beforehand. This match.
My first reaction.
Before you get into that, this match is Jack Swagger versus Chris Jericho on some random-ass Smackdown leading up to WrestleMania 20 whatever. It was the WrestleMania right after Jericho had come back from Dancing with the Stars and was facing Fandango. And Jack Swagger was facing Alberto Del Rio for the, I believe, World Heavyweight Championship at that year's WrestleMania. Continue.
The World Mid-Card Championship.
Yes.
Okay. My first reaction when you gave me this match was, I have to watch a Jack Swagger match to get on the Court-Martail podcast.
They didn't have to. I mean, it wasn't just because you had to get on. It wasn't the prerequisite to get on the show. I just sometimes like torturing myself and my guests. And it's a sadist thing. It's a masochistic thing. I get a kick out of it. Yeah, I spared you that.
Right. Now, I will say this. That thank God we had Zeb Coulter here. So let's talk about the actual context. The context of this match matters. So this is a couple weeks before WrestleMania 29.
Yep.
A WrestleMania that were it not for CM Punk and The Undertaker would have been worse than WrestleMania 27 and been the worst WrestleMania of all time.
That's saying something. That is saying something.
But when we talk about this particular match, I was worried because we had We the People Jack Swagger and Zeb Coulter, and Jack Swagger had a microphone, and I was like, no, please don't. And then he handed the microphone to Dutch, Zeb Coulter, and I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, it's...
And I will say, Dutch cuts a good promo.
Dutch cuts a good promo, but that entire promo was scripted for Dutch. I guarantee you that entire promo was scripted for Dutch, because I've never known Dutch to be that stilted in his tone when he was talking, you know, when he was cutting actual wrestling promos. But this is 2013 WWE, so there's no doubt that they're doing exactly that they were recording, you know, getting all the lines scripted. All I could visualize when I saw Zeb reciting those lines was the script that I have and the format that I have, and just I could see the poorly grammatical sentences lined up for him to say. And
then right after, before he goes out, the paycheck that he has to cut that promo.
Yeah, well, because it's Dutch, and Dutch has deserved and earned that promo, because I love Dutch. And it's hard for me to call him Zeb Coulter. I just love calling him Dirty Dutch. But Swagger is better, so much better, just dead staring into the camera. AEW is perfect evidence of that. Not even Lillian Garcia was excited about this match. Lillian announced Jack Swagger and Zeb Coulter and was just so defeated.
And the other thing, too, is that I could not help when Jack Swagger did talk the few lines that he did. I was looking for him to start stressing his words as usual bit, like a Dusty Rhodes as kind of falling asleep.
Yeah.
and then we get Chris Jericho before the midlife crisis.
Yes, I like in shape Jericho. Jericho is way in shape here. And it's funny, I thought it was ridiculous that this match was on YouTube, and 40 seconds into the YouTube channel, we get a break. And then they come back to do this promo. Jericho is in shape. Did you notice how much crowd noise WWE pumped into this video? Between the heat,
I thought Kevin Dunn did a great job with the crowd.
Between the heat and when Swagger got the heat later on, and between Jericho pop, there is no way that pop for Jericho was that goddamn loud for a random 2013 episode of Smackdown. I lived through that. I guarantee you that pop was nowhere near the way they made it sound.
Well, this is 2013 SmackDown, and they always did crowd stuff with 2013 SmackDown because I believe it was the peak show at the time.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to say this. I actually didn't think the match was that bad.
It was a SmackDown TV match.
But the problem with this match is that everything around it made it worse, including the commentary. Now, I'm going to give Michael Cole and Josh Matthews a pass because I think they were both fine. JBL was horrible.
See, it's funny to me because I actually thought the opposite of that. I thought that JBL was fucking being such a goof that it made me laugh. And Cole was just insufferable to me, because this was at a time when it reminded me of how long and how much the focus of the commentary has been lost. Because instead of hyping up Swagger and hyping up Jericho and their abilities and how big this match is, they're squabbling with each other. And I think that's what made JBL sound worse, is that Cole triggers JBL and purposely to trigger JBL, not saying something about Swagger or anything, but they just started like squawking like chickens. And Jeff Matthews is like, oh, and don't forget to watch SummerSlam. And it's
Josh Matthews is the Marcos of commentary.
And this was not Josh Matthews' worst. I think the problem with Josh Matthews is that the second that he got the lead job on Impact, he immediately tried to imitate Gorilla Monsoon. And nobody believes that Josh Matthews is Gorilla Monsoon.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because he tried to do that super animated, and then this, then we go, and then he came over here, and it's like, instead of Josh Matthews just sounding like Josh Matthews, which he did here, that was fine. But
he got so much worse when he got his own creative direction and he could do what he wanted.
Yeah, the second that he became the guy, nah, I'll pass on that. I really didn't have much in the way of talking about spots on this because there really wasn't much to speak of. There wasn't really much even that interesting. There was no heel spot. It was pretty much just Jericho got the better, and then all of a sudden Swagger just started working on the shoulder.
Well, I think the way this match was structured was that it was a competitive match, because Chris Jericho is the faster and lighter veteran who's using quick and precise movements to hit Jack Swagger. Jack Swagger is the athlete powerhouse, and he's using power. And it was a back-and-forth match. I don't necessarily think you need to have a huge spot in every single match, because then it just gets repetitive.
I could see the argument being made.
It would depend on what other matches happened on the show, but I'm not going back to watch that Smackdown because I'm pretty sure it would have been a bad show.
Yeah, I would not put you through that.
This is at a time when the product was not very good. And the reason why the product was not very good is that there are nonsensical decisions that happen, which we will get to when a certain dancer comes out.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of nonsensical, because that's my next point here, out comes Fandango, and...
Before we get there, did you see the botch leading up to this?
Was that...
Actually, wait, hold on.
Which one?
Actually, no, Fandango came out after. Okay, no. Go ahead, continue.
Okay, so, call me old-fashioned, but entrance interruptions are dumb. Because any wrestler who's trying to win a match, if you were trying to actually simulate combat and really trying to fight somebody and beat them, you would not just randomly turn around at the sound of some music and then stare at that all the way in. Entrance interruptions are just dumb, and they don't make any sense in the context of two people trying to have a fight. Unless that person was running down and actually wanted to beat up Christian, and actually beat him up, I don't believe that just having an entrance is doing anything psychologically. It's lazy booking.
It's even worse when said entrance interruption is elaborate and takes a bunch of time. For example, before, when Jack Swagger and Chris Jericho were making their entrance, there was not that giant frame with the yellow dazzlers or whatever the hell it was when Fandango made his entrance, which means it took them time to set that up.
Yep.
And anyone who watches the show knows that's Fandango's thing. So you know that he's coming out, but you're still pretending like it's this big surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, and no wonder it got no reaction. Except, well, Kevin Dunn would lie and say that it did, but no, it did not get any reaction.
Although I will say, thank God they had the brunette dancer, because I actually liked her.
Yeah, she was cool, I guess. And then
Summer Rae had to take over for that because she's not a great dancer.
Yeah, we'll talk. Listen, I used to wrestle. I used to ballroom dance, right? I actually used to teach. I'm a certified ballroom dance instructor. Ballroom dancing and wrestling should not mix. Hot take. They're just not in the same wheelhouse at all. And it was a bad gimmick to put Johnny Swinger into from the start. and it really hurt him. I think from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then Jericho goes for the walls, and then Swagger tries to fight out of it, and then Jericho tries to slingshot Swagger into the turnbuckle, but for some reason, Swagger just decides to like cling onto two of the ropes and then just fall. What was this?
Okay, so that's the botch I was talking about. He either tripped over Jericho, or Jericho didn't have enough strength to lift up Swagger properly for a proper launch, so Swagger fell into the rope instead of the turnbuckle where he was supposed to go.
It was just... Yeah, but I feel like Swagger could have easily compensated for that. I mean, that's mostly on Swagger anyway, to get up and do that. It must have tripped or something. It just looked awkward. And then they go into this heel finish where Zeb distracts the referee, and then Fandango kicks Jericho as he's hitting the ropes, and then Swagger bomb 1, 2, 3. And my question is, are Zeb and Fandango in cahoots? How would Zeb have known to distract the referee so that Fandango would have gotten the kick? This just seems a little too coordinated for me, and it's a reason why I've grown to despise WWE's format. Because...
Right, like, if Fandango had come out and no music and just kicked Jericho when Zeb Coulter was trying to distract the referee because he was trying to get his Swagger more time,
then fine.
That would have been more believable.
Yeah, that would have been fine.
But now it looks so contrived. Like, oh, this distraction spot's happening because it did.
Yep, because we set it up that way. Ha ha ha. Are you not sports entertained? And this also reminded me that there is an entire major WrestleMania feud all about mispronunciating somebody's name. What a blood feud.
And dancing. Because Fandango was jealous that Chris Jericho was on Dancing with the Stars.
This fucking company. How long have we put up with this? Too long.
The answer is, yep.
Too long. And then Fandango does the shittiest dip on the history of the planet with this brunette. It looked like trash, and it was just like a one last little fuck you to anybody who even cared about the ballroom part of this. It looked awful, and then it fades to black mercifully. Mercifully fades to black. Oof.
And that was WWE 2013, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. And here I was thinking, I mean, last week we had the Steve Corino, Terry Funk, Dusty Rhodes abomination. This was a whole other level of stank. This was a whole different variety of stank. It's like it belonged in the same dump, but they were in like two different sections of the dump. Like this one gets a whole different garbage container. This was just, it was something. We need to watch, I need to cleanse my palate and watch a good match this coming week on the live stream, so stay tuned for that. But now, with that said, let's move on to our final bit, and we don't have too much time to talk about this, and admittedly, I don't know as much about this guy as I wish I did going into this, but our Superstar Spotlight this week, we had another wrestler pass away. We've lost quite a few recently. But we had another one pass away, and this one had left an indelible mark on the wrestling business. And that is James Harris, also known as the Ugandan Kamala. Kamala was a guy who most people will know as the Ugandan who had the big face paint and like had all that, who faced Hulk Hogan a couple times and drew a ton of money facing Hulk Hogan. He was a guy who, his whole gimmick wasn't really wrestling. It was more of I'm just this big, brutish, crazy Ugandan guy who's just going to beat whatever's in the ring with it. You know, he's this big, wild man. And it worked for him in a lot of different ways. He was the first guy, or one of the first, to slam Andre the Giant. Ever. And that's not even mentioning how Kamala came to be. Because Kamala, when he was first wrestling in Britain, and he was just a dumpster fire of a wrestler until, I think it was Jerry Lawler or Jerry Jarrett in Memphis decided, let's make him this big wild man and change his gimmick up. So he may not be able to wrestle, but he can just be this big brutish guy who's going and beating everybody up. And then the second we beat him, he can move to another territory and do that stuff and go to Mid-South or go wherever he needed to go. And he ended up having a hell of a career out of it.
So to answer your first question, it was actually both of their ideas.
Yes.
It was Gary Jarrett's idea, and then Lawler suggested that, hey, he should beat me for the title. Then he goes out and he beats a bunch of other guys, and I work my way back after he injures me.
Right.
And I'll come back and get the title. And he repeated this format throughout without the territory.
And it was the perfect thing for him.
Kamala is an interesting character.
Yes.
Before he was Kamala, he was Sugar Bear Harris. And he was a terrible wrestler.
Yep.
And then he became Kamala, and he was still a terrible wrestler. But he had this charisma. And I don't know if you got noticed, but when WWE, when a wrestler dies, they put out a couple of matches on YouTube. And I saw a couple. There was one against George the Animal Steel, one against Pat Patterson, a Hulk Hogan match.
And Pat Patterson of MWL fame, Pat Patterson.
I know. And before he started putting on women's dresses.
Yes.
But anyway, well, sidetracked by the. I hate you.
Stay tuned for next week. That's all we're gonna say about that. Continue.
But anyway, you watch all these matches, and there's something about Kamala and how he looks around with his eyes and his facial expressions, and how he commands the room wherever he is.
Yeah.
And that's something innate that is very hard to see.
It's the subtleties about him. It's definitely the subtlety. He knew how to work the people, which is almost, as evidenced by a lot of guys at the time, more important than knowing how to wrestle, a la Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, all he had to do was wag a finger, and everybody was on their feet. If he was in a sleeper hold or he was in a hold and he was fading, and all of a sudden Hogan would just put up one finger and start wagging it left and right, and everybody went unglued. And Kamala had a lot of very innate knowledge similarly to that, which is why he and Hogan drew buckets of money with each other.
And it was evidence at the time that you didn't necessarily need to be a great wrestler if you had a fantastic gimmick.
Yep.
And his gimmick as a Ugandan monster, this guy from Africa who will destroy anyone and everything, it would work perfect for the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, when you want to talk about groundbreaking individuals, Kamala was truly a groundbreaking individual. And in a lot of places, broke a lot of barriers that otherwise would not have been broken. And then also it's worth noting that I think it's really important to address the fact that Kamala's biggest successes were in places like Memphis and Mid-South, where people of his nature were not necessarily treated that well, but they played so well to that, and they were treated right by those promoters on that basis, that he really was such an individual that you really got to give him credit for that, and what he was able to contribute on that respect.
Like 6'9", nearly 7 feet, 350 pounds. This guy was a toss.
Yeah.
And he used his weight around well. Like, I will say that the few wrestling moves I've seen, his power slam looks really good.
It does. Real airtight. And it's kind of sad because Kamala, like, later in life, he had diabetes and he had lost both of his feet, I think. But he's almost universally regarded with fondness, which is hard to say about wrestlers. You know, wrestlers don't normally get that kind of reputation, but he's a guy who understood the business, knew the business, and once he had found the niche, he ended up being one of the most influential of his time, and didn't get enough credit until he passed away, which is sadly the case with so many wrestlers.
And the thing about Kamala, and I think this is something important, is that he was a product of his time.
Yes.
Because if you tried to debut a gimmick like Kamala today, it would not work because he would be overexposed.
Not only He would not only be overexposed, but there would be so many people rallying to the, oh, you can't do that, it's inappropriate, and it's he would be PC'd the hell out of the business. And there was just a different time when people didn't have that type of attitude, where it worked. And it could work. And that's why gimmicks like that we'll never see again in pro wrestling, because they can't be. They're not allowed to be anymore, just by the overall nature of people nowadays. But Kamala made it work, and here's an interesting one. If you didn't get the chance to see this one, check out Kamala versus Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson, for the Ring of Honor World Championship in 2006.
Oh, God.
That match happened. It's 20 minutes long.
Oh, my God.
Daniel Bryan had a lot of wild matches at that time. He had a match against Lance Storm during that time. That was quite good. He had a match against Nigel McGuinness at that time, which was insane. And he faced Kamala for the weirdest reason. But you know what? It's a testament to the guy. It's a testament to what Kamala was.
And hopefully he can be an influence on other giants, because you don't necessarily need to be the best wrestler, but if you can command the room with your charisma, you'll have a long career.
Yep, and it's sometimes it's kind of like Big Show said. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but sometimes it's not about the kind of moves you can do. It's not even about having any moves in your arsenal. But if you can do more with less, you can go miles while only taking a step. And that's what Kamala really was able to do so well. And I'm glad now that we're going to be able to look back on him, and I'm glad he's getting the attention he deserves.
The only thing is that you wish you could have done it when he was alive.
I know.
I think that's something that we have to do with all wrestlers.
I know. We got to appreciate him, but you know what? All we can do is look back and grow as we continue moving along. And with that said, we now have to take our first commercial break. When we come back, we've got 2 exciting things coming up in the next week. We've got the live stream match of the week, and then we've got our third NWL versus ACPW head-to-head, where we will have this guy back on the show to recount everything that's going on with his show and everything that's going on with my show. Thank you very much for being on the show this week, Sky. It was a pleasure as always.
Thank you for having me.
As always, and with that said, thank you very much for listening. We will see you next time, and please enjoy these commercial break messages right here, right now.